Hello and welcome back to Not Just Paleo. I'm your host, Evan Brand. Thanks for joining me. Now, I just jumped on Amazon and I was looking at my book, my Everything Nootropic book that just came out, and a guy left me a 3-star review, and he says, supplements aren't regulated by the FDA, so this information is not safe. And my rebuttal will be right here. The FDA and the USDA are the same people who allow genetically modified organisms into the American food supply. These are the same people who approve of high fructose corn syrup being in your children's lunch. These are the same people that approve of sweeteners that are artificial, that have been shown to kill brain cells, things like that. These are the type of people and organizations that are those two organizations where people say, oh, it's not regulated by them, it's not safe. That's garbage. Check out my book if you haven't already. It's on Amazon. I make about $1.50 on each copy, but it's there for your information and to help you understand nootropics and smart drugs. And if you want to schedule a free consult with me, head to notjustpaleo.com. Scroll down a little bit, and then you'll see the free consult button. Here we go. Hello, welcome back. I'm here with Dr. Carrie Jones, a lady who's been super helpful for me in terms of my testing when I first started using a particular hormone test for my men and females that have so many symptoms that they never get answers from their conventional lab testing. And Dr. Carrie has helped me to provide clinical feedback when I'm doing my testing, and now it's time for her to join me and join the Not Just Paleo podcast. So thanks for coming on.
Oh, I'm really excited. Thanks for having me, Evan.
You were practicing for 10 years, you said, as a naturopath, and then you transitioned into the role that you're at now where you're giving clinical feedback around the world to different doctors and practitioners and things like that. So that's very exciting. How did you first get into naturopath?
Well, in college, undergrad, I knew I wanted to go to medical school, and I became quite disillusioned, which I think a lot of people do with traditional allopathic medicine. So I was living in Ohio, and I moved to Oregon. I needed a job, and I got a job at the naturopathic medical school randomly, and I realized that's the school I wanted to be at. So I applied and graduated as a naturopathic physician and did a 2-year residency in hormones, women's health, family medicine, and then I've been in practice for the last 10 years until transitioning to this job.
That's great. So for you, did you specialize? I mean, I guess for me, it seems like everybody is slanted towards females, but you say you would specialize for helping out females with hormone issues.
I did. The mentor that I worked with in school primarily was a women's health and hormone expert, so to speak. And so that's just the direction that I went. And what happened over time is what often happens is that women will come in and then they realize that their husbands have similar symptoms. Yeah. And all of a sudden I found myself treating, a lot of couples or a lot of, somebody would send their dad in or they'd send their brother in, they'd send their best friend in. And I got to see more and more men. I would say the majority, of course, are women because it seems more women go to the doctor. But hormones are my thing, most definitely. I would joke, if you break your ankle, don't come see me. I'm not the person that's going to help you. Yeah. But if you're hormonally crazy, I can help you there.
That's exciting. Yeah, I've gotten several phone calls from random numbers, and it's a deep voice man on the other end of the line, and then I'm like, holy crap, who is this? And then it turns out that it's a husband of some woman who's finally been convinced that he needs to do something. He's like, I don't know what you're doing, but it's working. So that's fun. Let's talk about adrenal health. This is something that you and I both love to geek out on. So many people have adrenal issues. Every single person I've tested over the last 6 months is surprisingly not stage 2 or stage 1 anymore. It's stage 3, complete burnout. And I'm curious to see if that's what you're finding too, because you're looking at a lot more lab tests than myself.
I am seeing that a lot more. What I'm seeing is a lot more perceived stress, which is really scary and concerning to me. The brain recognizes actual stress, if there's actually a lion or a tiger in front of you, and it reacts the same exact way as if you think or anticipate a lion or tiger in front of you. And I think in today's society, we have so much perceived stress on top of real stress that our brain, our endocrine system, our adrenals, for men, the gonads, the ovaries, everybody's just stressed out all the time. It's very sad.
Well, it seems like it's accelerated, and you've been practicing for 10 plus years. So have you seen an acceleration? I mean, as soon as the iPhone came out, I mean, did your lab test start getting more dysregulated?
Yes, I would absolutely agree. Yeah, definitely.
Well, because
Don't you think?
yeah, I mean, it seems so silly and so trivial, but at the same time, I mean, I'm guilty of it myself. I'm looking at the phone too much, and I don't see how we could have a balanced nervous system if we're constantly looking at something on the phone, because to me it's fight or flight. I mean, I'll feel myself jumping into fight or flight if I'm getting on social media sometimes. Do you feel that?
Oh, absolutely. And I was just joking with a girlfriend of mine how I saw a meme on Facebook or Instagram where it said, me trying to go to bed 10 p.m. and then it said 11 p.m. spend an hour on social media on my phone. And I was like, yes, that's what everybody does. And I see that a lot on lab tests. I'll see their nighttime cortisol be elevated, and the practitioner says, well, what's going on at night? I said, I guarantee you they're on their phone.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just as guilty. We're on social media and we're texting and we're looking up articles and, watching YouTube videos, and all of a sudden we're hyperstimulated and we're supposed to be in bed, but all that blue light is ruining our pineal gland and our adrenal glands.
Yeah.
And then we get a rhythm issue.
Tell people a little bit about what you do now, because you were practicing and then now you've jumped into the role of the main clinical advisor. Maybe that's not the exact definition. You tell me what the best name for it is.
So I'm the medical director of a international hormone lab. So we specialize in dried urine testing for hormones. So instead of like getting your blood drawn, or instead of saliva spitting in a tube, you just pee on a strip 4 times a day, let it dry, and then mail it in.
Yeah, that's great.
It's pretty easy.
Yeah, and I was telling you before the podcast, but I guess I'll mention it here too, that I used the Dutch test, for a female client of mine that has not had her period in over, I believe it was close to 10 years, and she had gone on all sorts of hormones and thyroid medication and everything, and I was actually able to use this test with extreme accuracy that her other labs that she sent over had no clinical value at all. And then now with the right supplements and everything, she's dialed back in, and she emailed me this morning and said, hey, I finally got my period back. And it took some time, but that's the power of a good quality test. So that's great.
Yeah. And then the appropriate treatment to match it. Once you have the information from the test, you know what to do and how to move forward appropriately. And then lucky for her, she got her period back.
Exactly. So just out of curiosity, how many tests are you looking at, would you say, per week or per month? I mean, it's got to be a lot more than when you were practicing.
Oh my gosh, most definitely. I'm looking at, I probably look at 500 to 1,000 a week, actually, depending on the week.
That's amazing.
Depending on the week.
Now, Are you seeing? Now, I guess here's the devil's advocate question. Are you seeing anybody with healthy or normal adrenals?
Yes, believe it or not, I do. I really do. Now, it's usually not the people who are sending the test in for the first time. It's the people who have seen great practitioners like yourself, and they're getting great treatment, and they want to know, what's my follow-up? What do I look like now? So that's when I see the good person. Obviously, nobody's going to send a test in. Some people want to just have an idea of what their hormones are doing, but I'd say the majority of people are tired, they're stressed out, they can't sleep, they can't lose weight. Women are having hot flashes, men are having mood swings or erection issues, and so it shows up in the lab test.
That's amazing. So where should we start with hormones? I mean, is chronic stress, is that your ultimate first place or the deepest root cause of hormone imbalance?
Yes, and stress is such a broad term, and I use it broadly because you can think of stress as, inflammation. Think of people who have poor diets and all sorts of gut issues and, gas and bloating, and they're eating the standard American diet, and inflammation is quite stressful. It can be emotional stress. Maybe they're in a terrible job or a terrible relationship. It can be sleep stress. They don't sleep very well, just like we were saying. They're on their iPhone or their Android late at night, therefore they're getting poor REM sleep. They're not making enough melatonin. That's stressful. I mean, it just keeps compounding itself. They've gotten sick. Maybe they have autoimmune. They have a thyroid problem. And it just keeps going and going and going, and then it builds up and takes its toll on the body.
Yeah, and it's synergistic too, but it's a bad synergy. I mean, you have
yes.
That's what's scary about it to me, is that you have the phone, or you have the Wi-Fi, or the electrical pollution stress, and then you have the emotional part, and then to me, the big one that's not really talked about is the relationship side of things. I find being behind a computer and doing a podcast and generally doing what we do is kind of isolating in a way. And then if I don't make an effort to go hang out with friends or my family, my grandparents, I start to go crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, and we hear this all the time, right? More and more of society, they know how to interact from behind a screen, but they don't know how to interact face-to-face. Or you go into a coffee shop or a restaurant and everybody's on their phone. Nobody's having deep, meaningful conversation anymore. Nobody's connecting. And it's so sad because we need that connection, right? We need that nurturing.
Yeah, it's funny to be kind of an outspoken, outgoing person, and then you come across people and they're unable to deal with face-to-face interaction. I think we're losing that, but there's still hope, I believe. But I do think we're in a turning point right now. I mean, smartphones get better, and now you can watch full movies on YouTube on your phone in your bed in your pajamas. Then it's going to be a little bit tougher, I think, to reverse this whole trend.
I think so too, unfortunately. But I mean, I know people are aware. You know, I read about it a lot and hear about it a lot, but I hope people are willing to just make changes.
See, that's the hard part, because I feel like we have all this brain candy. We have all this new research that proves this and research that proves that. But if it's just in your head floating around and you shout it out to other people, but you don't act on it, how valuable is that, you know?
Yeah, no, it's definitely true. It's definitely true.
So let's talk about hormones some more. So chronic stress, there's 1,000 million sources of it that cause
yes.
people issues. Now, you mentioned inability to lose weight, erectile dysfunction, hot flashes, other things like that. The first step for all of these people, and obviously they may say, oh, well, she's biased. To me, it's getting a test to actually figure out what is the status of your hormones. Would you say that's true?
I would agree, and it not even before I worked for Dutch Test. I mean, even before I was in the position I was in now, when men and women would come in and say, I have all these symptoms, I could guess. I could say, oh, that sounds like low progesterone. Oh, that sounds like you have low DHEA. That sounds like you have high cortisol. But if I didn't do the test and didn't know, I could really treat them in the wrong direction. You know, if I thought they had low cortisol, which we were kind of talking a little bit before the podcast, let's say I thought they had low free cortisol, but in fact, maybe it was a metabolized cortisol issue, then I could really send them in the wrong direction. And so testing to me is kind of the first way to start to take the symptoms, put it together with the visual picture, and then go forward from there.
Yeah, let's break that down a little bit, because it's mind-blowing to me to see the difference on a lab. So someone gets, whether it's this test or say a salivary adrenal test, and they're looking at their overall cortisol rhythm. We're talking about free cortisol there.
Yes. So
Okay.
Free cortisol. So the free cortisol is the active hormone, and it's what's unbound. So hormones, this is what I say. I say hormones are like children. They have to be attended at all times. And so that's a bound up hormone. And then when it's unbound, it becomes free and active and is able to do whatever it needs to do. It can bind to receptors. It can, unlock locks. It can, change symptoms only if it's free. But what people don't realize is that the majority of free hormone is a very, very small percent, something like 5% or less of free hormone floating or of hormone floating around is free. The rest of it, 95+%, is bound up and not active. So when somebody does an adrenal test and they're looking at their rhythm in the morning, in the afternoon before bed, that's a free hormone that's being graphed out, which is good. That's the active hormone, but it doesn't always tell the whole story.
That's exactly what I was getting at. So you led me into that perfectly. So then metabolized cortisol, that's the other piece of the puzzle that a lot of people, for me, have been showing up low for. So could you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so it's just basically it's a streamlined way of looking at sort of the total and the free. So metabolized cortisol is similar to the total gland output. So people will say to me, I have, quote unquote, I have adrenal fatigue. I'm like, well, adrenal fatigue is when your adrenal glands do not make cortisol anymore, cortisol in whole. And so what they're looking at is the free cortisol. I'm like, well, no, free cortisol is, remember, just 5% or less. But if you're not looking at all of your cortisol production, and so on our test, we call it metabolized cortisol, the total cortisol, then I don't know if your gland is able to produce cortisol. So that's why it's important to look at both markers. One, do you make cortisol in the first place? And then two, what's free and available?
So what's the most common problem that you see when you're looking at all of these tests? Are you seeing a more low metabolized cortisol, which would be reduced adrenal function, or are you seeing the low free cortisol, or is it both?
Believe it or not, I'm actually seeing a lot of high metabolized cortisol, which seems counterintuitive from what everything we were just saying with stress. However, stress, inflammation, obesity, high insulin, poor diets, all those things will push on the adrenal gland to make a whole lot of cortisol. And so I'll see metabolized cortisol really high. So it's not an adrenal problem. They're making tons of cortisol. But then what happens is I'll see low free cortisol, which is what we're all used to. We kind of call that when we would see the low free, sort of that stage 3 or adrenal burnout, quote unquote, adrenal fatigue. And so, but really the problem isn't that the person can't make cortisol. They're just making and metabolizing it so quickly because they have all of these metabolic and endocrine and stress and inflammation issues going on that there's not a lot of free cortisol left over to be used. And then they're exhausted because if you don't have your active hormone, you're tired.
Wow. So you can measure it accurately with the free, and you can see, okay, you're low, something's going on, but you have to dig a little bit deeper.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. So say that you remove all of the stressors and you fix the diet and you have a good nutrient-dense diet. Maybe you're balancing out your omega fatty acids and things like that. Is that metabolized cortisol going to come back down, and that's going to free up some of that energy, which then allows that free cortisol to be back into a normal rhythm? Is that what happens?
Yes. Yep. And I see it a lot. I see it a lot on a repeat testing.
Okay. That's great.
Yep. People can heal themselves. Absolutely.
Okay. So now if people don't change anything, and now does that metabolized cortisol eventually get low because then the adrenals do they ever really get fatigued where that metabolized cortisol is going low because the gas tank's empty?
So the adrenal gland will never, unless there's an autoimmune, which the autoimmune is called Addison's disease, unless there's an autoimmune condition, the adrenals will never run out of cortisol. It always has the ability to produce cortisol. But the difference is with all that cortisol being produced initially, if the person never changes, then a feedback loop kicks in and the brain says, whoa, way too much cortisol. Let's temper this down. And so production becomes less and less and less. And then we see low cortisol across the board. And it's kind of the body's mechanism to protect itself from all of that damaging cortisol floating around. And you will see that. You'll hear of long-standing illness or long-standing stress or, really terrible diets or what have you, and PTSD just over time. And then all of a sudden I look at their testing and I'm like, wow, I can really see that your brain has shut everything down. It's really slowed the production of cortisol to protect you. But as a result, you feel like crap.
That's amazing. I mean, because it is catabolic at the end of the day. I mean,
yes, and exactly what you said. And the catabolic people are those high cortisol people. And what happens is it's high cortisol in comparison to their DHEA and their testosterone. And as you just pointed out, like it's the DHEA and the testosterone that helps with the lean muscle mass, and it helps with the burning of fat, and it helps with not having all that high blood sugar and high insulin floating around. Whereas cortisol is very pro blood sugar, it's very pro insulin, it's breaking down all that blood sugar because we need sugar, right, to run from the tiger, except we're not actually running, so we're not using the blood sugar up. And then the body goes, well, I have all this blood sugar floating around that's not being used. I'll just store it as fat. I'll just store it in the liver. And the liver says, well, no, I'm full. So it just gets stored as fat. And so it becomes this vicious cycle, all because of that high cortisol.
So all the women out there listening, it's every single week, I want to get rid of that belly fat. it's
Yes.
it's always due to some sort of chronic stress that put it there in the first place, because all the other places that sugar could be stored to make that cortisol, they're full. All those other buckets are full.
Right, exactly. And on testing where you're just getting the daily rhythm, if you're just getting the free cortisol, you may have low free cortisol. Your rhythm through the day may look low, and you think, or maybe your practitioner has told you, well, you actually have low cortisol, but yet you have a whole bunch of belly fat. I'm like, yeah, I bet you have high total cortisol. I bet you have high metabolized cortisol. I bet you're very catabolic. And that's I would say 99 times out of 100, that's what I see on my end when I'm looking at the test and talking with people.
That's mind blowing when you add that extra dimension to it, because if you're just looking at the low rhythm, you assume that you just need to add in, which I know most people don't use that anymore, but I've read the outdated model was just to add in more cortisol, that practitioners would just use. I don't even know what form it was. Was that oral? Do you know what they were doing?
Yes, it was oral. Yeah, it was oral. And the prescription is called Cortef, and so that's what a lot of people were doing. And then the patient was feeling, maybe having more energy, but feeling worse and gaining more weight.
So is that the equivalent of if you're driving a 1978 Ford Pinto and it's about to be on its last leg, and then you're just trying to floor the gas pedal one more time? Would that be a good analogy?
Yeah, that's a good analogy. Okay. Yeah.
So then
that's
at that
a good
point,
analogy.
Either the engine's going to blow or you're going to have to slow down. So then at that point, that's when we run into the thyroid issues, right? Because
yes, yep.
Is the thyroid, would you consider, go ahead.
I was going to say, or sometimes it's concomitant. You've got the thyroid and the adrenal glands, to me, I always say, are best friends. And so they try to help each other out, but they can fail, so to speak, or not work as optimally at the same time, which is a double whammy.
So would you point, if you had to pick one, and you're looking at a pie chart and you had to pick which one's the bigger issue, typically is it going to be the adrenals that are the bigger piece of the pie that end up causing the thyroid issues?
I'd say in the majority, yes. I would say, I always say treat the adrenals in the gut first, right? However, there are definitely instances when the thyroid directly impacts the adrenal gland. So when the thyroid is really, really sluggish, it will slow down cortisol production, which people don't really realize. And so in which case, you have to support both at the same time. You have to support adrenal and thyroid. And I don't necessarily mean by thyroid hormone or thyroid replacement. I mean, maybe it's just thyroid nutrients, thyroid support, natural thyroid support to get it going again so that the adrenal gland can make cortisol. So in that instance, it may not be an adrenal problem. It may be the thyroid just slowing everything down. But yeah, I would say the majority of the time, treat the adrenals first.
Yeah, makes sense. So now with the thyroid, if you're talking about the offenders there, are some of the biggest ones, is that your bromides and your fluorides and all of the other thyroids?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah, definitely.
Now, you have fluoridated tap water where you're at?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately.
We do here too. So I'm in Louisville in Kentucky, and I went on the Louisville Water Company's tour. They gave a tour in the summer during a little festival because it's rated some of the best tasting tap water in the country, which it really is delicious. And we go through this whole tour, and she never mentions anything about fluoridation. And I know that the water's fluoridated, so I asked her about the process, and she was kind of hesitant to ask answer in front of all these people, which I found weird, because most people are not going to think much about it. And she said, well, the last step, as soon as we have all the water filtration done, it goes through the limestone here, so that's why it tastes really good. And then she said the last step is a semi-truck or two backs up to the big water bucket, if you will, for the city's water, and then they back up, and then they dump the dump tank full of sodium fluoride and mix it in, and then it's shipped out to the tap. And my jaw just dropped, and I was like, oh my God. I asked her, why do you all do that? And she said, well, the government makes us. And so I guess they're unable to make any decision to overturn that. Now, I know Portland.
Yes. Portland does not have fluoride in their water. Not yet. It's a debate ongoing all the time. Yes.
Really? Because, see, I remember when I was in Austin, there was a huge petition going around to try to remove the fluoride there. I was thinking this whole time that that Portland reversed it, where they did something and they said, okay, we're not going to do it anymore, but they just never had it to begin with?
Well, okay, that's a good question. Now I don't remember, but I don't believe we have fluoride in our water at this time.
Oh, are you in Portland right now?
I'm outside of Portland, so I'm in Minville, so we have different water.
Oh, okay. Man, that's insane, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. So I really hope that Portland can hold on and not get fluoride in their water.
Yeah. I mean, because we look around, and this isn't judging. This is just the way it is. You look around at people, and when you hear that 1 in 3 people are obese in the U.S., you don't really comprehend that until you go to a big amusement park or something, and then you actually see it, and you're like, oh, my God. And I was talking to my grandma the other day. She's like, Evan, you got too skinny. And I told her, I said, Grandma, she goes over to a casino all the time, and she's around all these people that are just eating and smoking and drinking sodas and whatever. I said, Grandma, you're looking at a population that is completely different than who I am. So it's almost like a normal-looking person can now look skinny to someone.
Right.
Is that?
We're skewed in what the normal is.
Yeah, it's mind-blowing. And to me, I always go back to all of these thyroid offenders. So it's not the people's fault. They don't know. They just end up on Synthroid, right? I mean, the doctor's like, your TSH is low. We need to crank you back up. But we're not ever getting
high.
to the
other
root.
way. TSH is high.
Oh, and then they throw them on Synthroid.
Then they throw them on Synthroid. So TSH high, and then the T4 and the T3 are low. Then they put them on Synthroid because they don't know what else to do. They're like, well, looks like you have a thyroid problem.
So what is the equivalent? Is that kind of the same thing where if the gas pedal's already floored, you're just trying to push it more with that drug?
Well, usually thyroid has an incredible feedback system. And so if you put somebody on thyroid medication, it's like telling the thyroid gland to sit back with the remote and the TV because the medication will do the job for it. So your own thyroid gland will shut down production and let the medication take over.
Wow. So that's
Which is why it can be really tricky to get off. Once you're on medication, depending on how high of a dose you're on, that's why it can be really tricky because you have to wake your own thyroid gland back up.
Wow. So it does downregulate just like testosterone would.
Yep, it does. And cortisol, like people are doing corticosteroids. People do Cordaid cream or they prednisone or they do inhalers or nasal sprays for allergies that have prednisone or cortisone in it. And it's the same feedback loop. We see it on testing a lot, especially this time of year. People are on their inhalers or they're on their nasal sprays, and it downregulates their cortisol production. So they're very, very tired. And we look at their report. I'm like, oh yeah, you hardly have any cortisol. You've enacted the downregulate the feedback loop, and it's because of your inhaler or nasal spray or whatever.
And some of this stuff now that's scary because a lot of this stuff you're talking about, that's over the counter now, right? Like the Flonase and things like that.
Yep.
And so these people, they have no idea. You're saying basically they're adding in. Is it cortisol that they're adding in with those sprays, or what is it?
It's the corticosteroid, so it's the like the prednisones, not the sort of bioidentical cortisol, but it's the other one, the prednisones in it. Mm-hmm. And so that's but it still causes the feedback loop, and their adrenal gland gets downregulated.
Wow. So I guess on the bright side of things, instead of people resorting to the inhalers and all of these other exogenous things, we could just be pulling out the allergenic foods. We could be helping support the adrenal glands. So, I mean, give us some good hope for this, because so many people are dependent on these little crutches like that, like the inhalers, or they go to the doctor for the steroid because they have a weird skin reaction that pops out after all this stress and things like that. But how do we get to the root of this thing? Right.
Well, I mean, it definitely is. It's modern medicine, unfortunately. What do they say the average doctor's appointment is? Like 9 to 11 minutes. Yeah. I mean, you just can't get a history. You can't talk about diet. You can't discuss stress and relationships and what's going on in 9 to 11 minutes. And so, unfortunately, the way that the model that medicine is following doesn't allow for doctors or providers or, healthcare practitioners to get into diet, to say like, hey, look, you have a lot of phlegm. Like maybe you shouldn't eat gluten and dairy because, maybe you should stop it for 30 days and see what happens. Like, oh, hey, look, you have a corn allergen or a sensitivity. Maybe you should give up corn for a while. But instead they say, oh, you're snotty and congested. Here, take this inhaler. Or excuse me, an intranasal spray. Oh, you have a tough time breathing. Here, why don't you take this inhaler? It's like, well, you're kind of perpetuating the problem.
That's crazy to me. It is the more that I interview people like you that are tuned into functional medicine, it just makes the big red thumb that is the conventional approach to these type of chronic issues even more ridiculous. Now, if I break my arm, I'm obviously going to go get it fixed. But
right.
if I have the sniffles year round, I'm not going to go there because it's not going to work.
Right. Right. I mean, and just like with any medicine, there's, a time and a place. Absolutely. If you're having a full-blown asthmatic attack and might die, take the inhaler. Don't think about your adrenals at that moment.
Right.
Use the inhaler. But just like you said, if you're having year-round asthma, potentially there are a lot of different things. It could be in the food you're eating. It could be to the environmental stuff you're exposed to. Maybe you have a mold exposure. Maybe you've got, it's a candida. Maybe there's just a host of things that it could be.
So I know I've given you a little bit of topic whiplash, and you are just so on point. So thank you so much for allowing me to just go all over the place with these hormone questions.
Absolutely.
All right, so let's talk about some takeaways. I mean, it's so funny, however deep you dig into things, with health, when you zoom out and you're like, okay, stop being on your phone at night. It's so simple and so profound. So what are some things that you've done? I mean, maybe I know you're giving a lot of clinical feedback to people. Are there some lifestyle things that you add into those, or do you mostly go for the more treatment approach in terms of when you're giving recommendations?
Oh, definitely lifestyle. Lifestyle is the easiest thing to change, and it doesn't usually cost any money. The supplements cost money, even supplements that are needed, but to stop your phone at night. If you go to bed, if your goal is to be in bed at 10 or sleep by 10, then you should probably be off your phone by about 8:30. And like I said, I'm totally guilty. And unfortunately, I'll be on my phone or my iPad, and my husband will go. And my husband's not medical at all. In fact, he's an officer in the Army, and he'll go, honey, you're destroying your pineal gland. I'm like, stop listening to me.
That's awesome.
Stop. Don't listen to me. But I think definitely the number one, sleep is so critical to our health because it's during sleep that we get all of our cells scrubbed and restored. It's during sleep that we make melatonin and we make growth hormone. And I tell people that growth hormone is like scrubbing bubbles. It goes through and it heals and repairs so that we wake up feeling refreshed and restored. And how many people can you say wake up in the morning and feel refreshed and restored? Not many. And so it's true, the hypothalamus in the brain requires 7-8 hours of sleep a night. And so that's what I tell people. We really have to get good quality sleep. It's start there. And then number 2 is diet. You are what you eat. So if you routinely put junk and sugar and simple carbs and, fancy coffee drinks with whipped cream in your body, then you can expect that your engine's not going to run very well, and you're going to feel tired, and you're going to have blood sugar stuff, and you're going to have weight stuff, and you're going to have hormone stuff and skin stuff, and it just goes without saying.
Yeah, it's crazy. Now, when you go to Christmas parties and things like that with your family, is there a circle of people around you asking you questions about what they can do to fix themselves?
No, believe it or not. I mean, it depends sometimes, but I think people, I'm gluten-free and I'm dairy-free, and so I think sometimes my family is like, oh, we have to think of something gluten-free for her. I'm like, you should be gluten-free too. I got it from somewhere.
Exactly.
I'm like, it's genetic.
Yeah. Well, it's just crazy to me when you start really talking with people and you are in a social situation and say you get on the subject of health or something like we're talking about, people are interested in this stuff. Even if they don't admit it, even if they're not ready to really take action yet, people start to perk up a little bit when you're talking about sleep or, their sex drive and things like that. And maybe they don't get the deeper part of how to fix it, but they hear how much more potential you can have to be a normal or optimal functioning human. And that's appealing to people. I think we've also forgotten kind of like the weight thing we were talking about earlier, the average expectancy of how a human should feel and operate through life has been skewed too. And I think people are accepting garbage moods as normal. And it's like depression is not, that's not something that we should be feeling. I mean, I've watched tons of Amazon tribe documentaries and different articles, and most indigenous people, they don't even have real words for like happy or sad. It's just they are, and they're always smiling, and that's so mind-blowing to me.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. People accept stress, they accept fatigue, they accept moody as normal because everybody is, because their coworkers are, their family is, their partner is, their friends are. You know, you text somebody, "How's your day?" and somebody writes, you know, it's emojis, right? You get the frowny face emoji, or it's the sad face emoji all the time, and it's like, yeah, me too. It's like, no, that's not normal. You can feel better than that.
See, that I'm so happy for what you do, and I'm so grateful and thankful that there's people like you that exist that are doing this stuff, because we have to be little beacons. We have to be little lighthouses out there.
Yes, definitely.
There's a lot of dark out there, would you say?
Yes. There's a lot of for as much information as the internet provides, I feel like there's also a lot of naysayers, and there are a lot of healthcare practitioners who do follow the traditional medical model, who are like, no, you just need this medication and you'll be fine. But then the medication doesn't work, or it comes with side effects, or it really doesn't address the cause, and you just get stuck in this whirlwind, and can't get out of it.
Yeah, so this is my last question, because I know we got to wrap this thing up. How do you maintain some sense of sanity about that?
I think because of where I work, I hear super positive, exciting stories every day. Just like the feedback you told me this morning on your patient who got her period back after, years of not having a period, like you figured it out, you got her tested, you worked with her, and she emailed you how excited she was she got her period. And I hear stories like that all the time. People really do want to, for the most part, I think, get healthy. And in the field that you're in and the field that I'm in, it's so empowering. People come and they say, "I don't feel good. This is what's happening. I need your help." And then it's really exciting to put it together. And it's even more exciting when they email you or call you and they say, "I've lost 10 pounds," or "My acne is gone," or "I don't feel depressed anymore. My panic attacks are gone." And it's just so exciting. I just had a doctor that I've been working with. Her patient had really, really low cortisol across the board, couldn't figure it out, been to all these endocrinologists. And I read a research paper that Accutane, for acne, kills off cells in the hypothalamus. So I said to this doctor, go look up Accutane, go look up this research. Your patient's on her second round of Accutane. Sure enough, she sent me an email yesterday and said, "You're not going to believe it. We took her off Accutane. Her blood sugars are back to normal. Her cortisol is back to normal, and she feels amazing." It was Accutane, and I'm like, hallelujah. Like, this is amazing. This poor woman would have probably put on drug after drug after drug to get her feeling better again. And it was removal of Accutane.
Oh my gosh.
That did it.
That gives me goosebumps.
And, yeah. It's simultaneously scary, but also exciting at the same time that was the simple answer for her. She just had to stop it.
And now she's fixed almost, or she's on the right path.
And now she's on the right path, and they're going to do obviously she's going to do an entirely different treatment plan for skincare, because, she was on Accutane for acne. And so now they're going to work on gut health and, diet and vitamins that are skin supportive. And I think this patient will be just a 10 out of 10. I think she's just going to feel amazing here in the next couple months.
Oh, that puts a smile on my face. That's awesome.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you. Well, tell people where they can keep up with you. Do you put out any blog posts or anything that people can read?
We do, absolutely. If people go to www.dutchtest.com, we actually even have a blog section, and I do write part of the blog, which is super fun for me. So Dutch is in the country, DUTCH, test.com, and that's where we are.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Dr. Carrie Jones, everybody. Go check her out, and thanks so much for being part of this. This was a blast.
So thanks, Evan. I really appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning in. I hope you have a great weekend. If you're listening to this and you're thinking, Evan, I've been listening to the show for a year, or I've been listening to the show for 2 years, and I have XYZ symptom that I know I need to do something about, but for some reason I'm not pulling the trigger, pull the trigger. I just talked with a girl yesterday. She said, Evan, I've been listening to the show since it first started, which is, you're talking about 3 years at this point. And I finally decided that it was time for me to get checked out. So that's my recommendation for you over the weekend. You can go schedule yourself. Just visit the website, notjustpaleo.com. As soon as you get to the homepage there, you're going to be able to see the new client information where you can get access to my calendar and schedule yourself. That's it for this week. I'll talk to you really soon. Take good care. Bye.
He acts like it's all good, yeah, like everything's cool. Kiss her, got a line, and he leaves her. She doesn't have a clue that he's terrible blues. Why I'm in a tie, I got to watch out, girl. Don't wanna see her cry her eyes out, girl. Cause I've been watching, you've been hurting. Let me be the one that loves you better.